Hey guys, welcome back. This will be part 2 of proving that Gojo defeats Heian Era Sukuna. I apologize that it took so long. I've been really busy lately, but if you haven't watched part 1, I'll link in the description below. Now without delay, let's get right back into debunk all the horrid arguments from Sukuna fans. We're going to pick up right where we left off with chapter 231. Gojo and Sukuna now no longer have domain expansions. We've already debunked every argument saying that Heian Era Sukuna would win with a domain expansion. In chapter 231, we figure out that Gojo actually enhances his punches with blue as well as curse energy, further reinforcing that he is better at hand-to-hand combat. Some Sukuna fans like to try and discount this by saying, well, he's not better at hand-to-hand, he just has blue around his fists. Well, if you punch harder than someone, which he does with blue, then you're better at hand-to-hand combat. So this in no way discounts Gojo's hand-to-hand combat skills. In this chapter, Sukuna openly admits that there is a countdown for him to adapt to infinity, and that is the way that Gojo will, quote, lose that smirk. If restoring his body would have gotten him away around infinity, then he wouldn't wait for the literal countdown. Now moving on to chapter 232, we can address another common misconception. Sukuna can just win with domain amplification. As we can see in chapter 232, in 2 different scenarios, we see that Sukuna can't use domain amplification to stop stronger abilities. As we see when Sukuna is being surrounded by multiple blue orbs, instead of negating the damage with blue, Sukuna has to dodge. We even see that Sukuna's durability cannot stand up to blue as it takes off a chunk of his side when it passes through him. Next, we see Gojo tricking Sukuna with red. It's even stated that he can't fully negate Azure and reverse red. Now, when Sukuna fans say Sukuna planned that too, I honestly don't know how to respond to that because it's so baffling. If you choose to believe that when Sukuna was caught by surprise and knocked out by Black Flash, then go for it with your head. Honestly, can't argue against that. It's kind of hopeless at that point. Regardless, I'll still debunk it with panels. Sukuna literally thinks he outplayed Gojo when he says, "You're sloppy. Are you panicking because I saw through you?" So yes, Sukuna already thought that he outplayed him, but he didn't, so it was not part of the plan. We even see Sukuna being surprised when Gojo said red hasn't exploded yet. So again, not a part of the plan, but if you choose to believe it, do your thing. So now I've also proved that domain amplification by itself has its limits. I also proved how Gojo is better at hand-to-hand combat. The only reason Sukuna survives this scene is because Mahoraga shows up. There is no way to argue against the fact that Mahoraga saves Sukuna here, as he was fully knocked out and asleep. There was even enough time for Gojo to have thoughts of losing and pull off a full combo on Mahoraga before Sukuna even woke up, which means he would have had plenty of time to pull off a purple or even a fully chanted red. Next comes the argument of Heian Era Sukuna being so much better at hand-to-hand combat because he has 4 arms. While there's no denying that he'd be better than his Maguna form, we already have evidence of Gojo keeping up with 6 arms and 3 different opponents at once. In chapter 233, we see Gojo fighting equally with Mahoraga, Agito, and Sukuna, all at once without infinity. Let's count again. That's 2 arms from Agito, Mahoraga, and Sukuna, equaling 6 arms. This continues in chapter 234 as Gojo can fight Agito and Mahoraga 4 arms without infinity. Keep in mind this is also a Mahoraga who is not only adapted to Gojo's Black Flashes, he's also adapted to his speed, hand-to-hand combat skills, and many other attacks because he's also getting hit by Gojo and he adapts to anything, not just curse techniques. Next, in chapter 235, we see Gojo being in the zone after Black Flash and being so much faster than Sukuna that he can land another Black Flash on Mahoraga and blitz in front of him before Sukuna can even react. In this state, Gojo demolishes Sukuna in hand-to-hand combat, throws him into Mahoraga, and forces Mahoraga to block the next Black Flash for him. Count again. That's 4 arms again, and Gojo showed his insane superiority once more. In other words, Heian Era Sukuna wouldn't be so much better at hand-to-hand combat, it would make enough of a difference to beat out Gojo in hand-to-hand combat red and blue abilities. Again, I showed earlier that domain amplification can't fully negate red and blue, and there's no reason that Gojo would only be limited to hand-to-hand combat, unlike Sukuna. Gojo once more showcases his battle IQ as he outplays Sukuna once more. Shoots red into the sky to interact with the floating blue that he used to destroy Agito. Sukuna does not see this coming and has to scream for Mahoraga to try and stop it because he admitted himself in the previous chapter that he would be destroyed by a direct hit with Hollow Purple. Now yes, in the next chapter, Gojo undeniably loses. No one can refute this, but he only loses because Sukuna gained knowledge and blueprints on how to bypass Gojo's infinity through Mahoraga. Now this is where Sukuna fans reach peak denial, by saying Sukuna would have found a way around Gojo's infinity anyway. However, Sukuna refutes this himself by saying what I designed for Mahoraga was a model in order for me to breach through your infinity. Now, I know it says that inviolability word, but every time I pronounce it, I don't know. I feel like I mess it up, so we're going to say infinity. This is where Sukuna fans get ready by saying he said desired, not needed. To this, I say, if you need to get anime debate ratty, then you know you're already in the wrong. However, I can refute this by diving into the rattiness as well. Desire is defined as a strong feeling of wanting to have something or wishing for something to happen. To want is defined as have a desire to possess or do something, wish for, or ought, should, or need to do something. So you can want something you need. Taking into account all the evidence I've shown so far, Sukuna needed a model to bypass Gojo's infinity. What could I say? You gotta be ready to be ready. But again, if you need to be ready to argue for your point to begin with, you're already wrong and you know it, you just don't want to admit it. So in conclusion, I have proven that Gojo defeats Heian Era Sukuna. Now, don't get it twisted, would not be an easy fight. Gojo would still struggle and he'd 100% lose the first domain expansion battle again. But afterwards, he would definitely adjust and destroy Sukuna because of his superior hand-to-hand combat. Heian Era Sukuna would be forced to only use domain amplification to try and bypass infinity both in and out of the domain, which would prevent him from using techniques except for the ones granted by his domain. Well, what about his weapons from the Heian Era? Sukuna fans might be thinking this. Well, we don't know what they do. All we know is that we have one that does lightning damage. We don't know how much damage it does, and Gojo will be able to easily heal this with his reverse curse technique, and that can even keep up with the attacks inside of Sukuna's domain. Even then, Sukuna can only land attacks with his weapon if he was nullifying infinity the same time he used the weapons. Gojo simply wouldn't stand around letting Sukuna nullify his infinity while he uses weapons on him. Sukuna fans somehow like to think that Gojo would just stand there and do nothing. Now, it's very possible that Sukuna would find a way around infinity if Gojo stood there and did nothing, never fought back, and just let Sukuna throw attacks at him until he figures out a way around. If that's the scenario Sukuna fans want to argue so they can believe a Heian Era Sukuna wins, then by all means, delusion of that level can't really be cured or argued against. Lastly, the latest chapters proved that the last argument that Sukuna fans like to use about reviving to his original form was wrong. They would always say he could just use his domain expansion after restoring his body. I've said for weeks now that he wouldn't be able to do that because the brain is stated to be harder to heal than the body, as we saw with Gojo pushing his limits in the domain clashes. Well, it has now been proven that I was right. They openly state that Sukuna can't open up his domain expansion, so restoring his original body wouldn't suddenly grant him a domain to finish off Gojo, when Gojo was also unable to use his domain expansion. Here's the thing, though. Wouldn't the truth, the actual truth, be the most entertaining? Sukuna fans need to realize that if Sukuna truly had everything planned and Gojo fell to his trap every step of the way, then Sukuna would be so far above Gojo that it wouldn't even make narrative sense for him to lose with all the Jujutsu people jumping him at once. Doesn't this also make things way more interesting? I feel like the story would be so much less interesting if there was actually no competition between the strongest in history and the strongest sorcerer of today. In my opinion, the best way to look at this entire battle is very simple. Gojo is the strongest, but Sukuna is the smartest. Gojo's Limitless is the strongest curse technique in the series, but Cleave and Dismantle are definitely nothing to shrug at. Despite Gojo's technique being stronger though, Sukuna is smarter and found a way around his infinity. He prepared for it. He used all of his prior knowledge to win, including the knowledge he gained in Yuji's body. Sukuna, with only one glance, can figure out a curse technique, their weakness, and can learn on the fly. He literally saw Mahoraga's model for Infinity's weakness only once and was able to replicate it immediately. He knew Cleave and Dismantle couldn't do it on their own, so he used Megumi's body and curse technique to give him the advantage. He prepared perfectly, and through that, won in the end. Gojo is the strongest, as befitting the title of the strongest. Sukuna is the smartest, and knows the most about Jiu-Jitsu, as befits his title of the King of Curses. If we can all agree on this, and the evidence I provided, then Gojo and Sukuna fans can live in peace. For now, I would say that I comprehensively broke down every detail and facet of this battle. If you like this kind of long-form content analysis, then please leave a like and subscribe.